Which one of you all is the one?
Nathan is the one.
Okay.
And
And which one of you all is the...
Aaron.
Aaron's the one?
Yeah.
Cool. Can I assume you're Aaron?
I am. Alright.
Yeah, dude, whenever you're ready.
Alright, we're good? Yes. 50 years ago, NASA was faced with the choice between human machine acquisition and the obsession with the mission of aerospace being close to the cyber machines, were used to nothing but 8 human spatial language, 10 trace products, and teams outfit, one charge, doctor, and I change human time to all trace the human, and adaptations to space, permanent cyber information, or cybernetic eye, cyber spheres, may or the price become cybernetic, or dance, and something concept online was still a human to hear a cyber is the most human body like coming in as refused. The cyber believe that is cyber great, that as contributors that astronauts, find American culture to continue. The new millennium, American server, all working brains as brave. God for your pitch, get a village focus on human questions, have some human elements, but unstable advanced technology, convert the development of entities that purpological part machine, erotic human corporation, separate entities master, and certain technical development, ministry merger. And this political ethical choice situates itself in a larger narrative of nostalgia to become a real human. We have never been human, we are always already cyber. Norquist and 10 even actually agencies all possible the combination, not even so monsters of human bodies, or the parts of not even making back up and processing for material types. They walk with a shoot a driver with an automobile person uses self become something different and never attach with you, and otherwise you're not tools, they modify us. But we want to, what we're capable of doing, envisioning human being, he has reason using being, limits of connection to human being, we've never been human to be human. It's counting challenge to redefine their infinite relation with entities. And this system of evaluation is what beings count and what do not, is a politics of exclusion. This makes real ethics impossible and violence inevitable. Rather than selecting of value and the human, we ask you to embrace an impossible ethics of infinite hospitality and Trona and 10 the body between machines, without less obvious sexual artifacts, themselves in the family of the cyber of the planet. We purely already started drawing out the possibilities driven by these technologies become the role predictors of we judge. We choose the creation of the experiment, or we everything is value in terms of its worth and point of valuing is zero objectivized, not let being be relevant, being be solely out between we come and setting which are setting value systems, and our own self is the absolute otherness of every other should be the all-world predator we need. Ethics is the impossible, but in comparison to outcomes, culture, and something ethics of humans who make a decision about the significance of being governed sentience. The criteria for considering significance, we argue, it's necessary for the feeling of pain. Why should pain be a criteria for significance? Because we can feel pain is not such a criteria, or more worthiness being like us, and like something coming to define. Coming out of the categories, real family, about 9 direct all this human other is a reflection of the face opposite. We can suffer ourselves for the other because we can imagine what it must be like to suffer around violence because we suffer around empathy, or ego considered a single universal community body of human intersubjectivity. What about the environment? However deeply we meditate on people that exploring solid and say yield to single that can be themselves they are, and the goals of being infinite holy are they are more of it than other because we don't put ourselves to choose no basis, or it's through the end, but I'll have the possible to show holy other to the other, and two images of self the same than presence holy other. The question of ethics comes out, but it's a real question. Goes also the question, the other only fits around goes symmetry about unconditional hospitality, all the other shatters. Like walls within this category about rights, laws, and principles, they fall through the cracks, making him feel justified around and others. The other refuse to be on evil, thus ethical relationship to the others, unequal relationship to a height that cannot be comprehended, which opens up relationship to humanity all without such great symmetry. The other can become codified and called calculation comes up sure what's still open. You be others to be true, let's build the inanimate speak in their signs and voice to reveal more judgment, expose them as graphene, and corporate cancer powers and authorities see and confirm they speak as mirrors revealed to us as consumers seeking them for prevention of possibilities, connect their identity and power, we use them, and they become the hospitality, but only have become some of the voices of the others that surround us. A human tendency to treat the inanimate as our instruments need to be suspended unconditionally without just the possibility of an hospitality is not possible. Hospitality is not the luxury of time. You think all the short decisions not satisfied about politics, some of them ability to be no final record, no sounds lost. You dispose of anything the possibility of hospitality, disappeared, sound thrashing of the cup and the destitute face of a male human being must be interrogate or ethical relationship to the other with equal urgency. This does not mean between an inanimate object the same as a human. There is no same without the comfort of about to have the respect for inside the way it's been, or principally even our live here and now again and again. And the inevitable termination of the universe provides us with an opportunity to embrace ethics. It should be the first impact you evaluate. Clark and 10, there's no need for the ethics to increase of transportation because catastrophes affect count so much the bodies that human beings, much as human matters, which all form the body level potential for becoming precedence, or the expedition body is directly being irreparable as part of death, which places in order to fake false sexual being less termination. Then any configuration of your doom catastrophe starts to love, getting so teach returns to the orbits of the pure space and physical comments against philosophy, should necessity of thinking me and will be totally irredeemably extinguished life, eventually demon promises time without thought between human life, and lends out the significance of facing other country clips, all but involved, but infinite. 1 trillion years from now, the expansion of the universe will surge into the fabric of matter itself, terminating the possibility of embodiment. Every star will have burnt out, plunging the cosmos into a state of absolute darkness, leaving nothing but a husk of the collapsed matter. And yet, is that very phase of a faceless cosmos makes ethical being to another. Every gift carries form of its human existence. These churches from rings to life, republic, sort of hinges from ontology and engage. The passive generosity of man that must enact more calls for two. Does remove that irresponsibility to permeate over something that every deal discharge that's against demands by man from every object and everything in response to someone left from man that should be turned away from things to turn away from certain things to choose not for capacity of associate ensuring toward ways of inequality now too. and refuses your engagement with the ethical community, denies our personal finitude. This formulates a logical complete control and immortality that ushers in planetary extinction through mechanization. Jeronin in 11, the ability of the body being concealed by limits, protect the world's scorched down and unconcealed on the earth, even though the world's scorched cannot unfold, you think it's all they are. Another male thinking things is all that they are. Future realms of disclosure always conceal all possible ways of unfolding words those conceal. The inexhaustibility of things that are to not by rejection and power kept good working puts aside. The final computer, watching fighting out parts of this, some of the vulgar solutions that make the touch and time modification with ease, and implementation of based on genetic mechanization and orbital zone, even though there's engineering may mitigate the consequences of climate change offers the calculative molding solution. The problems submitted by the chemical subjugation of the earth, the mechanization of applying achievement rather than dry. There was trouble we can resist mechanization of the earth, recognition of our finitude, our gas force gets to stand. It's what's completely contrary to the meaning, the being, the nothingness, and excludes the opposite of being part of mechanization. Just now the appearance of finitude destroys the earth, turning it into an air planet. Earth is not a planet because the planet belongs to the reputational thinking that has the fundamental witness, the visible earth, the definition, the organic, the natural, the blood, our metaphysical termination that presupposes sense of collective subjectivity, not to find the chance. We're open to take a logical as opposed to violent exploitation of nature. We are left with an metaphysical sense of dwelling based on the finitude of being, and the growing remains open for an event without a sense of finitude. Limitation of thinking is in danger, encouraging ontological balance, so balance measurements can be controlled by 40 new realms of collective craving for mortality, such voluntary new ground for new oppressions, nature dominating products, new structured control for violent authoritarianism, but also violence of power control, violence and oppression, restraining of the demonic expansion of the order, two sides of the same coin of the manipulative and unlimited power, calculated mechanization in order to follow through the opening to notion of futures are possible whether mankind, not by mankind, is still the course of called the limit of the home. And they'll plan the United States federal government should substantially increase the exploration of space beyond their metal free with cyborgs. A radical openness to the cyber resolves in confrontation with the possible alternate plans for creating conventional of space between humans and robots working together to don't now include the term modifications without a home state themselves every origin human jump period to cure the creation of the cyber support the humans versus robot questions around both humans, which the new driver being both are entity not be human, we also not be machine, both entities of some conscious way would be something new plus an entity, would be more advanced potential no gear to be should take time to the extent that mean to presume mortality plus entity that need those conditions of much motivation to move no ready to think and both humanity possessing affinity for particular vicious expression created by humans who now make the abstract of any machines for the pourpose of humans that something which true post-human creation man desire to pursue the interests of human beings, man that's placing the vision motivates goals really impossible in all the original vision of its exploration was one of the most like Adam Scott vision was conventional, high compatible with cultural norms at the framework, technology, and the portion longer, maybe less realistic than others because carrying out the vision space exploration required change of methods the result in displays the cultural motivation and election activity in the first place exact having cannot be known possibilities are worth consideration, and it is impossible to separate ethics from the actions policy otherwise done in its name. Cyborg ethics alive and opens to other beings in Trona in 90 as the hybrid of important between no such thing and neutral scripts and impossible avoiding politics there we go. Is it possible to avoid politics and ethics through supposed neutrality? These anybody's science technology moral landscape of hybrid smooth that way to supposition of politics and ethics separate the ethics of hybrid. Make us where there's no civil line humans and humans things and human reflects each other we constitute. Each of the responsibility political is ethically morality number human technology morality produces. The human beings, in other words, morality is not something a matter of our choosing and cognition is chemistry. Cook and what is the human mind's about the quality consciousness but fundamental attention to the expert neurophysiology neglect of the neuron's fundamental mistake ever go to study the possibility of the explanation and understanding of the neuron and significance of consciousness ignore their neuron then understand the gate is my mental name work application, then the true natural interaction neuron actually by my previous insights activity is cell mechanism makes neurocognition possible, cognition rudimentary neurophysiology, it's part of the base facts, certain supplement level mechanism makes neuroscience possible, and openness to others is key to rupture status quo violence hinder, and certain UK individuals are captured by their environment ways of being, and even refrain to go around their heads, IDCWCs again powers wide, the limits within we think following like extension of or contract technology provides new means of effective more forms of modern activity replacing, imagine the vast majority of the individual in the situation with the personalities were linked to the institution rapidly called consider the equality of the relation with others is dulling to the question of opening new models away of life universes. The reference is like a singular light, and the best oracles without people to start over, so regards uncertain as new ways. You said the words next experiment like the work of progress in the world.
Let's talk about the last piece of evidence. Why does acknowledging the other in our system resolve violence? And how does that in our mind resonate with that in our mind?
What?
The last piece of evidence you said openness to the other.
This one?
Yeah. How does that resonate with our minds? How does that work?
Like the scientific reason?
No, I'm asking like the emotional process of how that appeal resolves otherness.
Well, first off, we don't try and resolve otherness.
Okay, then what is that stance of the card?
This Pinder's on card?
The one that talks about otherness. Openness solves otherness, whatever.
This one I just read?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay, this card is talking about that when we think we know the end sight of political possibilities, it has limited our creativity.
Sure, okay.
We can only imagine what we already know.
Yeah, why does he fall under that framework where...
If you don't fall under that framework, we reject that.
No, I know, but why do you fall under rejection of that framework where, like, you have an insight of, like, we should do cyborgs that would resolve otherness?
So, let me explain. So, you might be right in the context of the ethics of the one I say an insight, but that end sight is an openness, right? Which is openness to other beings so they can influence us, right?
Are you a consequential ethic?
Wait, what?
Are you a consequential ethic?
I don't know what that means, right? If consequential ethics means that impacts matter, then we have impacts, right?
No, okay, that's right. Moving on. The plan, you defend the implementation of the plan.
We will defend throughout the round that the plan is a good idea in the context of the ethical justification that we've had for it.
Sure, but will you, are there any reasons, a city affirm, the United States federal government does not explore space with cyborgs, are there any reasons to vote affirmative?
If they did not,
If they do not put you explore space using cyborgs, are there reasons to vote F?
well, we
If that
advocate
doesn't
that-
happen, if you do not imagine.
So a world in which the plan does not happen are the reason to vote there's an ethical justification why the plan is a good idea.
Right, okay, so will you defend the
If
implementation
you-
plan for the purpose of our stats?
Yes, for that.
Thank you, okay. The next argument, your intro evidence says it's impossible to separate ethics from politics, otherwise it exposes you.
Yeah.
Say there is no such thing as a neutral description of the impossible to avoid politics and ethics. What does that mean? How do you avoid politics and ethics?
You can't, is exactly our argument, right? Every action that is done is laden with ethical justifications for it, right? You cannot be like, nothing is done in a vacuum, no policy
Sure,
action,
okay,
no
so I'm
actions.
confused. Are you separating politics and ethics?
No, our argument is that politics and ethics are inevitably twined, which is why our argument, that is my stipulation to your question, do you know the plan? It's through a
So what is your
particular ethical
stance on
lens.
politics then? I understand your stance on ethics. What is your stance on politics?
What does that mean? Like, what is the
If
action?
ethics and politics are inevitably intertwined, and you're like, yeah, ethics are good,
Right.
cool.
No, we have an ethical political strategy, right? That's our Notre evidence that says that the ethical political strategy. It's a really long one. It takes like 2 minutes to get through the one I see. Like the ethical political strategy of the one I see is an openness toward beings. We like the ethics of the machine.
Sure, okay, that's fine. Last question.
Okay.
Space travel includes new alternatives. What do these new alternatives look like?
Well, Lanius is from 2008, so he's probably talking about like the new thrusters on rockets when he wrote that card.
Well,
Oh, okay, so he's like talking about like
that's
the
part
status
of, he
quo
also
alternatives
just,
to
he
space
says
travel.
that it allows for new alternative modes of being.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. When he says
Well,
new alternatives, he also means like the ways we can approach being.
You
Right?
guys, bro?
No. You wanted two though, right?
Yeah. The really long card?
The long card. It is long.
As though there were only one.
It's gonna be 5 off in case.
Well, there are multiple, but there is the long card.
There's like the monster long card.
Yeah.
You can actually see your 1AC.
Yeah, you can have it. Just where I just put it. Right.
Yeah, I'll get it since we're
Okay.
back there.
What's it called?
It's the 1NC round 6 ToC.
1 second.
Wait, is this the flash drive?
Yes.
This one?
I give him yours.
You said 5 and then case?
Yep.
Starts with intern.
Yep.
Okay.
Nathan, I'll get you your paper. Where's that?
Let me just grab one up here. I got it.
And Judge wants to flash, so. Judge wants to flash.
Oh, sorry, yeah,
Please,
sorry.
Thanks, dude. You find it.
Can I take it too?
Sure, I'll do it.
I have 4, 5 anymore.
Just wait a second.
Not my evidence, dude.
Do you guys care if I take it for starting?
Yeah, totally. Look. You want to move this so I can put that here?
Here you go.
I can catch it.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, is everyone ready now?
You want me to put it?
Is anyone not ready?
I think we're ready.
Ken?
I'm ready.
Judge?
I would like the flash drive when you guys are ready. I don't need to wait.
I don't have it.
Oh, I have it.
she
Do
has
you want
it.
to give me a second and then I'll
Yeah,
give it to you?
You
guys
can
know?
wait to start, dude. It's your partners. Appreciate it.
It's probably not being.
This one.
Yeah, probably not.
What was it called?
This is why we can't have nice things, man.
What's it called?
No, I mean, I acknowledge myself.
What's it called?
True.
1NC round 6 ToC.
Did you actually go to Coachella?
I did not this year, though. It was an NEC this year.
Oh, well, fair enough.
I would want to go to see that like hologram
Tupac.
shit.
Tupac hologram?
Well,
Wait, what is
I heard that there were
I-
more overdoses on that single performance than any other performance ever at Coachella.
Wow.
I can see
Steele
it.
said, "Oh my God, is that Tupac?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see it.
Right.
It makes
Oh, I
sense.
know.
I don't know. I don't know if it's such a good thing, man. I think it might ruin concerts. Like if
Hologram,
every
yeah.
concert's just like a
No, I
hologram.
agree.
Dude, don't you want to?
Totally
Well, yeah, but
agree.
don't you want to go like see like
Beatles?
like the Beatles in concert again? That'd
But
be
you're not
cool.
seeing them again.
Yeah, you're
They're
just
not-
seeing holograms,
Right? It's
man.
a virtual
Over
reality.
yard.
The next thing you know, like it'll be like John Lennon covering "Call Me Maybe." Like, why is this happening?
That would be awesome. It's ruining
It's like combining the two greatest things.
For the sake of their speaker points, please stop.
See time.
Come on.
You don't like that song? Oh my god.
No. It's not very good.
Alright, I'm just gonna say.
Yeah.
First interpretation of the sole purpose to answer resolution questions now going to talk to the plan of the status quo, better policy option, the violence of claimant advantage independent of the plan's voting issue is violation. Against vote negative ones, the grammar that resolved before clone reflects the legislative form, the army officer war, the opponent is the former result clone the constitution, and the means the answer for the government means the debate solely by the policy and the outcome policy to establish by government means Erickson, each of these elements nature the United States of the verb should action policy actions by the government means the target is whether something should also occur, and see this grammar is the biggest impact allowing the framers to justifies arbitrarily changing the question of the between infinite number of framers, all the framers storing the predictable and the negative always grammar the firm always grammar still need a predictable basis for determining this the communication for how words interact, knowing just changing the focus to be move the resolution altogether. Two is limiting our frame and narrows down the topics of the debates to define a number of potentialities, expecting them so this significant number of philosophical these remains is less than 2K. The convention continue the right as government the end is a dystopia between these imagine infinite possibilities that will kill self-destruction unless happens. Second, installation has been said projects from all sober humans are seeing a few possibilities to fail the theories that cannot appeal as much as check politicians that the realize series of supervised logical opposed to what to rational B is linked to crucial to ensuring fair debate which makes not predicted as narrow mutually people understanding stuff the comments reverse meaningful research and research the economics the exact opposite of the app but it's not fair for productive unless they have an option to prepare those arguments in advance. Three is the plan focused quick framework to roll about from a yes to framework presented a question about the desirability of something else and then the singular logical policy focus debated the search the best policy logical policy making is the biggest real the biggest educational impact like the religions what this can be next off is export import will pass now let's say go straight for 26 the over and the captures you read authors like sending here and pretty close to an agreement we put together some increase says that the Western region deal in terms of all purposes will take you to increase the maximum as well we'll start to have 26 rules called on sorry to maximum development for sure as expected to deal sooner rather than later the plan will be controversial in Congress budget climate groups is used to chronicle in finance supporters makes about the kind of funding necessary to himself the commercial budget the focusing cutting about adding just straightforward require cuts into the other areas the lawmakers will do make the truth also said through additional $3 billion to you being enormous challenge how that's pronounced the lawmakers is with the House Appropriations Committee panel and Paul Kapsky James 314 Obama is the committee that after all the main features pushed by the administration presumably finance participants joined by many more and XM is key to solve warning business wire and XM begin the first agency to adopt comparison hard policy guidance for support the U.S. and the U.S. and support some climate concerns in the promotion of green technology boards approval of the current policies and support sets of transparent terms of the environmental stewardship the centrality of solar wind and geothermal energy the policy also commits the bank to be a leader in green financing the technology reduce the AGG and certainly evaluating environmental consequences of the projects that warming causes extinction to kill in warming would mean that the human extinction collapse of the ice maps would become inevitable as requires capacity would be hugely reduced and next off is text Congress should delegate the authority to substantially increase its exploration of space beyond this mesosphere with cyborgs to the National Aeronautics and Space Administration the NASA should pursue an active congressional delegation it's competitive they don't expect their agent to reach the vote negative because it kills agent carbon and branches to specific distance and hurts knowledge about implementation and the carbon tells the activism to politics that so the external handling and 90 Congress delegate authority to regulatory agencies the industrial place for agencies specify what agencies do know and how legislative the authority taking advantage of expertise of what laws and institutions purposes of the committee system delegate power is simple to monitor and next office critiques uphold the existing system because they are safe out that for transgression was necessary to supplement any system power this is GJK 95 to bring key numbers with the law fails the public was not surprised that those cell phone done recoding those who maintain their distance integration of the law of the public law are inherent social or always close together communities not identification law but rather this committee serve normal circuit but identification of the specific normal transgression of the law and the side org is a psychic figure of anxiety the affirmative is a utopian attempt to heal the current fractures in our psyche this is Woods no date. The cyber myth attempts to self-penetrate the political paradigm that pays little attention to the psychic and picture you already then kind of separate and it's a privilege of sex and liver as a deconstruction of that sex to invest in cyber to make it a problematic model most modern methods in regards to the cyber is global phenomenon of viable method for substitute and both modern cyber restrictions to openness and allegiance to social feminism is a central unsolved problem the climate was not just as possible to ensure political efficiency the extremists depends on proximity to smart communication and powers susceptible to information overload disintegration cyber data as oppositionality and just strategic commitment to higher ways else does not carry but cannot guarantee, and their utopian vision of positive to realistic scapegoating, and genocide the other. This is strong Pakistan and our ancient social fragmentation, political system, universal pre-modern, and expression fully represent nature, the instrumentality of the real, this fantasy to form utopian situations, this reconcile futures like fragmentation hills, the classic strange sense of the utopian precious disease, a positive result of the human creativity, how the realization of question, how the realization of the conversion of this prefer to more free, utopian emerging belief, policies, the motive, policies, policies, before anything freedom, meaning of the rise of periods of uncertainty, the social instability of our element, political subverts the fantasy of the stability of our political realities of utopian general supervision, grave and tags and associations, social field, show it's one of the possible response and activity, the real science which is constituted the human experience, utopians to the images of the future, human communities in which kids will be resolved utopia, this element and talent to recognize game purpose and harmonious equilibrium, every utopian fantasy escape with constant self and opportunity fantasy, the drinking Jews, the sample fantasy, or elimination paradigm for scapegoat, this stigmatized scapegoat is a danger one, the realization of fantasy system, stigmatization, called discrimination, utopia, comparison based on impressions, and balance, and the surfaces of difference described in the name of utopia that restricts the figure, then it was your net, there comes after the human kind of theory, the valid sense of any, something logic behind this utopian cooperation of the alternative is to embrace the kind of politics of uncertainty in order to institutionalize the lack of strong caucus and the methods to attempt to institute social lack of value, satisfactory to the possibility that political satisfactory institution the fancy culture of investment order, social level organized, the possible norms to structure those represent those certain right, any temporary safety division strategy, the depends on the illusion, all shape of not superior time, it makes an element of the site, the kind of theory can stand at the forefront struggle, to check by the Francis system makes everything possible, sound logical system rooted in the only roots of society, rooted in the only uncertainty of the air of the crisis, other case opportunity to find the appropriate foundation, so the murder we know based on the certainty of pricing down money, which makes it weight down a measure of self-modification, it will be a new policy to recognize the uncertainty of the movement, the kind of theory connecting catalyst for this change, will become starting point. Next off is counter advocacy text. The United States federal government should substantially increase its exploration of space beyond the atmosphere with cyborgs. The definitive article, the, before the United States transmits the image of a clear and objective national boundary, the ask repetition of consciousness solidifies this perspective, enabling an exclusionary boundary division of the world and the problems of exclusion 52K. Working on the change is impossible, so long as the geological forces continue some frame as the things that some leading plus what geological course of the detailed verbal so it can suggest and pastor either we control the sense that they do one directions that sounds like people are actively whether the relative motives are in tune or at odds with our side action and some accomplishment granted displays it is done in the marginal conscious awareness the phrase of the nation is the defined article is the national words in the whole 97 seen but unnoticed features to go very to present and the actions of the lurk behind the geopolitical reason which is both sense of us and not is not like them and this the inevitable result is extermination authorization generates psychic investments necessitates totalitarianism and in global structure 97 will do stuff just spend chance them to destroying all the opposite of the psychological life others working in the organization flowed by ideology to spin the perspective that good people and good people less than bad people than the really future ideology to try to more criminal life either or inside authentic characters like ideologies people the stuff of human beings so that's what the other good feelings associated with them too and the impact of associated with others outside is the team nice construct is anything fits to the part of the sees the group that setting concepts in shared opposition of the group people experience annihilation splitting massive rejective identification and externalization the fear of loss and and the establishment of extermination and totalitarian mindsets paralyzed Nazi Germany and guarantee extinction left in any national belief systems produced as a characterized the measures of policing against enemies in Nazi Germany this ideology biologists from view society who trying ordinary people to murder criminals to take shape around the weapons of worship the what's going to also be truth in there the capacity to transfer uniform nuclear fundamentalism and time ideology nuclear holocaust and possible potential for radically increase the consequences of totalitarianism the post-human extinction given capacity of weapons to destroy human life extent of self becomes down to your life of humans so what? Okay, so role of knowledge, valid consequences, and ethical justifications, in a sense, second to purity, infrastructure, one themselves, in the world of real life, for a long period, just opposed to the consequences, the risk of other, the most action, significant episode, the figure of cyborg fails, does not solve any of your exclusion or ethics, certain go in, cover, in 600 numbers of the ways, in which cyber develop the popular culture, the average of is because the cyber is not intrinsically challenging or liberating, like fear, that's a function of a figure which reinforces by track, the fact that children track is what dominating Western thought, the problems of the figure of the cyber may rise, and too many problems of the figure of the cyber may pose tense, postmodern thought. I stopped on postmodern thought on the Go and Shabbat card.
Okay. Alright, first question, status of things?
Okay.
All of them are conditional. Okay. So the counter plan, the pick, sorry. So let me get straight. Saying the ascribes national identity.
Right, the before the United States.
But saying United States federal government does not ascribe national identity.
Yes, because we do not use the word the.
Okay, but it's the, not like United States federal
I mean, in
government.
an offense-defense paradigm, saying the is a net worse for a net more increased national identity.
Net two one more national identity too many?
Yes.
Okay. The first counter plan. So I understand why doesn't it link to politics? Because NASA does the plan?
Right, the Congress can delegate the authority and the agency to do a plan to a certain
Okay,
agency.
I understand, but you don't think that Congress giving all funding mechanism, like ability to appropriate and determine what projects NASA does, giving all that oversight to NASA doesn't link to politics?
We agree that it does not link to
But like,
politics.
I mean, I
Has there ever been a
understand
time
your-
that like Congress has been like NASA free reign?
I don't want to answer your question. I understand your train of thought. The argument is Obama doesn't get drawn into the controversy, which means even if there is like a little bit of political debate, Obama is not seen.
Wait, why not? Doesn't why?
Right,
Why is he?
congressional delegation shields Obama.
I know. Wait. Okay. Hold on. If the counterplan can have NASA give NASA the ability to determine its own funding, and that doesn't draw Obama in, despite the fact that there obviously be a huge debate in Congress over that, why does Obama get drawn in over the plan when your link evidence is incredibly generic?
Right, that doesn't matter. All it is Obama gets drawn in over the plan. What the delegation does is it makes Congress give it to NASA, and Obama is not involved in that action of delegating it, even if there is a debate in Congress.
That's fine. Let's talk about the criticism. What is this link through this Woods evidence? What is the link to this argument?
Ken,
What?
what's heard?
Yeah, Wood's evidence says that the way that you try to use the cyber argument, or the way you try to incorporate it into our political imperatives, is an attempt to necessarily heal the fractures of the status quo that has led to otherization, right? So that is your argument. So the Wood's evidence says
Wait.
that
So
when
do you
try to
think
that,
that like the genocide of others is acceptable?
not at all. Like the argument is, it's not. This is not a.
Because your evidence says,
eugenics
quote,
good
here what I want is cyborg integrity and oppositionality. Where did we, first, when were we Haraway? And two, when did we ever advocate cyborg integrity?
Sure. Even if you do not necessarily advocate cyborg integrity, we obviously have answers to we are not harrowing the blog. The idea is your philosophy parallels Haraway's mistake.
Okay, Stravakakis. That's not a New Yorker. What is the, who is the other that we scapegoat and genocide?
Well,
What is the other?
I can give you an example in the terms of Nazi Germany.
No, I want an example in terms of the
For
act.
you, we
Yes,
can't
to
tell
us.
until your project has happened. However, it is inevitable because it's
So you're just like, just cause? Okay.
yeah, just
Prep time?
Nope. All right. Framework case, I think, let me check, I think I put the agent kind of on before the word. No, it looks like it's gonna, wait. Yep, agent counter plan percent, it's gonna hit an A spec on top.
Yeah.
Okay, wait, hold on. Framework case.
Framework
the
case,
counter plan
agent
with-
counter plan,
But A spec on top.
which percent A spec on top.
Okay.
Then, wait, shoot, okay. Counter plan, word pick, K, dishead.
Okay, I found the shoe tie a little distracting. Framework, case, the counterplan with A spec on top.
Yep.
The pick, Zizek, and the export into the
Yeah.
I guess I call it Zizek, I suppose it's Stavrakakis.
Laconicus. Well,
Okay.
doesn't matter.
Now you've gone too
You call it
far.
psychoanalysis.
So, framework.
Yeah, fair enough, we'll call it psychoanalysis, I'm fine with
Ready?
that. Wait, hold on a second.
No.
Sorry. Pretty precise with these labels. Probably needless.
Ready?
Wait, you want to use this one?
Yes.
Sorry. That time always breaks. I'm sorry.
Alright, now we're good.
Sorry.
Framework 1, counter integration will define the plan, context of the ethics, and 1 2, we have control the only meaningful internal link to education, that's space policy trap, and model framework interpretation to keep us discussions, and 3, we have the best model for debate of anything else exclusion is 1. Aside from knowledge, continuously knowledge, and money, social lives, and to get these crucial ways of knowing, teaching, situation, knowledge, between knowledge, being knowledge, unlocated, what's not subject knowledge, is not knowing, always constricted to the other, knowledge, conform, traditional, Cartesian, control, the pioneer position, alignment, that cannot be recognized, we feel the eyes, these accomplishments, suspected domination, all considered other students who curriculum, by domination, understands the world, and read this back, which determine their academic progress, these students by the students from the orange because they cannot very part, and this such amount of crime students come with important social, cultural, economic, and knowledge, encourage students to be critical of these biologics, there is no background of their interpretation because everything's always already a question of politics and ethics means we neither we meet our argument, but even SPS and BFDFs require closely shift the way we approach space policy and reasonability, best competing interpretations, custom race swap, and complicated nerves, disseparate ethics. Now we questions of fairness education, we win our ethics. Ethics all the matters we control uniqueness, fairness education, for loss, but ethics to be affirmed in the moment. Versus reason to direct the argument at the hume. Conditionalize the border with force contracts make me debate. Gives myself excuse or strategy, they steal our best offense and kills that. Because I just go for whatever in a cover that's an unfair time turn because I want to see kind of of course only a card that's too national for 2 years here, it's way higher, and there's no negative because there's no negative resolution case. 5 framing issues: A, extinction of inevitable trap and sensible human from the social human infinity devalue solving, setting reserve from leads to worse acts of violence as return evidence of B. Ethics are ethic, but infinite hospitality, infinite otherness and operate framing in the face. Go over that's insured and D, C, extensional and possibly go negative, the demarcation value. U, B ignores the infinite value and all makes violence and all that's insured. D attaches the first elemental and level, terminate death matters not because matters the change, but because someone is decided to exclude. D incarnate now handling the way they say consequences. We meet our ethics are consequence, but roll the balance should be the who can adapt the most ethical structure to what they say consequence, but this. Card is just in the context of the cyborg cyborgs being used, following science fiction, obviously we critique those tropes, we are not used to cyborg and that metaphor as such being said, we are opening to all forms of otherness means we solve the impact. Counterblend. A-spec we meet will defend all 3 branches, but it's simply aggressively so things like higher expectation, counterbalance, or voter seals, we can't generate actual offensive kills by folks because we only debate about implementation and it makes it impossible to have any strategic decision calculus. That's the most portable skill from debate on the counterbalance permutation do. Counterbalance ethics should be the center for combinations, most critically spend 7 minutes with second justifying or ethics and everything's always already a question of ethics. That's our internal evidence and permutation. Both but 3, the counterbalance makes our ethics conditional means it doesn't solve our internal evidence, our ethics must be extended unconditionally and they don't solve Campbell 7. Policymakers can engage in conscious over consensual validness of where it comes up with development security policy, dominates between arguments, demonstrate the importance of warrant duty, protection policy serve as a person who differs from one's level of idea, working conditions of resident machine public figures, all the cardinals engaged in pressure. We get it, that's one new person relation this obviously links to politics because Congress plans to mandates the Congress gives funding to NASA, which means it's so expensive links to politics. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Permutation do the counter, 1 permutation do the counter, 2 permutation do both, and then 3 were picks our voting issues, still we can't debate the merits of the plans, emulate rest of the config, things like highlighted colors and bias because everyone critiques words, but no one actually defends it. It's not for literature based on language is fluid, game and game. A government is referring to a particular nation, but editing and imposter, pressures when pressures remain unspoken, the direction made more difficult, the formal original language, our wish of linguistic and physical violence, establishment genuinely specific, the discourse requires transformation, cause, or violence, where the illegal, question, and speech, those men non-violence for the rest of the primary commitment, this means, which achievement political goals is secondary by the case, obviously solves the impact where critique of violent, state violence, we are opening to all this, otherness, which means we wouldn't do things like a totalistic Nazi state with the plan, Commonwealth probably links just as much to that, but they still say, United States federal government, and, yeah, they're centrist violent, about 97. When we come to an injury by language, describe by language, the language part injury, exercise the force like receive as we get the economist first, open mind the no active central so cannot do, name alongside another possibility of being called named a certain possibility for social existence. Yeah, that's good. Okay. First link our linked arguments, when we are not a utopia, we are not an attempt at utopias, we realize our ethics through things like action. This argument anyway that separates ethics from politics, the two are always combined. We are impossible. We recognize that our ethics are impossible. We can never realize, but still we're final strive for them. That is the only risk. It's the only risk that we have some level of impact. 2, we are not a form of empty critique. We are an actual attempt to change structures. And 3, cyberguarders argument doesn't make any sense. It's mostly in the context of airway. Concealing the meaning of the cyborg B, a critique of concealment as for German numbers B, an opening of the cyborg has revealed something else. Obviously, we don't scapegoat anything. I did a double dog dare them in the 2NC to say who in then possible ethics of openness to all forms of being as they are would allow us to genocide, but permutation do both, and permutation to do with the alternative. The status quo space policy is repression of the machining of the plan, is an essential reversal of this egoistic drive. That's what 187 is psychoanalysis 5 Q. Contemporary society and social norms are misperceived as executive law and science lead to individual content. Normalcy of the machine, the modern ethics are in cities because so does scientific knowledge itself is the unconscious modern power hours of economy. Marking the individual truth, ability the individual. This applies to everyday life, which categories the individual possible and the truth, normalizing tendency, power. Excuse behind individualization, the endless examination, the inner self does not lead to self-knowledge. Keywords the most specific political struggles, the struggle against regulated and liberating power, psychoanalysis, illusory service indicate individuals even deeper in the disciplinary power. It's only the urge to confess, the urge to confess is only perceived. Of course, but disregard self-revelation, disclosure of yourself, and unconscious leads to more efficient regulation, normalization through self-listing subject, the investing subject is the instrument. The denomination we do not have to export our ethics onto anyone else, but we are able to access our ethics no matter what because we ethics we affirm in the moments and individual choice people like Connie Prue and Kanye ethics see any alternative elements of 5. Isn't this pregnant as the advocated Kanye political world theory resides for the alternatives level different from mode, condemns nothing actually changed at the level specific characteristics, the only change is the characteristics of all the change, the interpretation as long as they reconcile, especially the concept of like the politics acceptable, Kanye theory tends to reduce, anything goes ahead to do the state action, nothing is over the political consideration of facts, used by nominal elites and their psychoanalytic ethics, master signifier which allows no antagonism to the alternative, the impact is hegemonic essentialism, nihilism, and replication of persistent forms of real violence, reference to 5. Look, I insist on the need for master secondary step of power establishing language and saying this conditions of language is master potential practice to the audience instance of master secondary social rejection multi-oriented the need for master secondary need restore motion and coaching the need arising from the physical concept of life physical and everything expresses itself in the manner for hegemonication antagonism and concept of social relations and hegemonic gesture requires an exclusion of the demanding master secondary would be reject the perceived order and function itself of the need for social order to embody the separate question of the knowledge register establishing master secondary blocking any inquiry social meaning what it calls structurally necessary master secondary demonstrates the centrality of logic how do you assume that the concept of life necessitates the construction of positive which in particular agent can fully commit master signifier roles, continuation essential symbols with like operating as master figure myself, concept like explicit tell or general function universal semblance over, how do you restore the idea of a universal framework through back with the method things like constituted of like so it's said that order not the link period of building any theory something like under should be organized with separate alter of self because the self is conceived as a decision upon the alternative difference is not a reason that right despite not came back there the master nerve of this prime example of the fantasy is violent method of polish. One thing it's also like politics, and two, the two things like the AWC thing, space policies are trigger the link. There's no, they don't read a specific link of some plan, but three, and their approach to the environment is the exact the logical control. As Rome Evans says, humans are finite beings. We can never understand and fully control the environment. Means it's impossible for us to do anything to actually solve the environment only with more control. Maybe absent things of openness, or acceptance of all being, not rejection of systems and calculations. They will solve the impact of their environmental security span. Bill 3. One person is of social construction one can constitute by concentrate around our revenge against outcropping is some say ready go on crisis is where supposed environmental speed called grim doomsday to the crisis time to people find a solution first when it's the final solution at least believe the expert solutions are possible people inducing them accept their opinions people feel since there's no difference when individual that's one may go along with it on point PS that there ever being political action to solve a warming even if they allow the framers to do it whatever having all cause deforestation how it's seven just looking at these words will more seem to than every other planet history of aviation and India and became the largest vital emitter last week following that was resilient either Asian that have the industry blame tons of CO2 after the atmosphere from deforestation. We lose forests, we lose the fighting against climate change. This is not intrinsic rational policy. You can do both. Vote on the debate now will trigger the link. The warming sun rush check. Climate change is that may changes the year surface temperature, all direct linked to short-term statistical fluctuations in the sun's radiance of the sun. Over 16% of the increase in Earth's average temperature groups in general, which are modeling the sun's event. That's why they significantly overestimate the anthropogenic contribution of warming.
And no one would use green.
And no one who uses the green tech in their politics internal stairwell doesn't say anything about political capital. And don't let them put any spin out of this. Obviously not key.
Okay, after vote now you said what?
Nathan?
After Bruno, he said warming's not real. You got a card on that?
Warming not real, no one uses green tech.
No one used green tag, and they said your evidence on a poll is really bad.
Okay. Reasons to reject this condo.
Condo and agent counterplans.
That brings me to another question, the delegation.
And word picks.
And fix, okay. Agent counterplan flow, agent counterplan, or entity spec, agent counterplan that, from the counterplan, ethics first, from the both. The counterplan's conditional doesn't solve, what's the politics?
You also read the footnoting part.
Yeah, that was the you don't solve. I just think it's you don't
The
solve.
process footnotes your ethical.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So, why does reading the 1AC change the way the public views cyborgs?
I mean, it's not so much a question of reading what you see. That's part of it.
Right.
Yes.
Why does
I mean, that's not the point. First of all, we think that how the public views cyborgs is relevant, but reading the 1AC is important because it shows, I guess, a legitimate ethical movement as opposed to subverting it as part of a part of a greater political strategy. The political strategy of the counterplan is to pass the import-export bill, which means that our ethics will always be pushed as secondary. Second, since you've read the counterplan in the context of a one and two with lots of arguments.
Excuse me for a moment. Right. Why does doing it through a separate process necessarily footnote what your 1AC is?
Well, I mean, the first argument is the reading the 1AC. The second is just that your process, your focus, what you deem to be the discursive action that was important to include in your speech was part of what warming arguments is specific when politicians and academics say, this was a discussion that happened, I will use it, but they use it in a context that devalues it and puts it as part of a broader political agenda, which is what your counterplan does. The second link into this argument is the Speech Act. The fact that you want to see was still lots of other arguments.
Thank you, but you said at the beginning of your cross-sex that reading the 1AC isn't what matters, it's the plan.
No, you're mischaracterizing it. The plan text is not what's important. The ethics are what's important. So
the plan isn't important?
No, it's important so far as it's ethical, politically important.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like the political, it's not necessarily a political concern, it's a, I'm sorry?
I was just saying that's the right answer there.
Alright, so it's not necessarily a political concern, it's also about ethics.
I mean, all political concerns are about ethics.
Oh, alright. So,
like every political concern has a reason for acting. There's a reason to do
is
it.
there more,
Otherwise, it doesn't
are
make any
there
sense.
more than one ways to gain an inroad to like an ethical form of politics?
Well, our intro evidence says that our ethic is uniquely good because it's one that opens ourselves to the being of all other beings. There's
there are
nothing
other
of that
ways-
exclusion. If your
there are
ethic
other
is
ways
one
to do
that
that.
devalues or excludes other beings, then it's probably not ethical.
Is there a way to be open to all beings without necessarily using cyborgs?
Well, we say that the cyborg is a good point to recognize our interrelation with technology, why we always owe ourselves to the other. I can explain that more if you need me to. But B, probably the idea that we can exclude some forms of being from our ethics, but we're open to everything else, doesn't solve any of the ethics. That doesn't make it's incoherent.
We'll take some time.
Sure.
Clarification question, what was the last argument of the word bin?
Last argument was censorship strategies and violent other.
Okay.
What were all the perms on the K?
I permed you both and permed you all.
Yeah.
There's going to be an out round today.
Yeah, partial doubles are after round 6.
Is the out round called runoff round? Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just watching.
Did you say you wanted to take another?
Thanks, dude.
Or it's whatever the most recent one is on there.
For sure. Yeah, you guys need to see that.
Yeah.
Nice catch, man.
It's like the first in a while, very poorly. Yeah, I did freshman year.
There's there's a power strip in front of you.
I was a little surprised when you caught it, I'm not gonna lie.
I was too. It's like a 1 in 10 times thing.
One and done, even the losers. Speech to C 429 turning out.
Sure.
Starts with XT consequences. Okay.
The order is case, delegation, and voice.
In politics?
Yeah.
You on back?
Sorry.
You should take this, I don't lose it.
Case counterclaim politics.
Which counterpoint?
Delegation. Sorry, what?
I was saying which counterpoint.
Delegation. Everybody?
No, actually, one sec. Can I get my timer back, man?
Oh,
Sorry, I forgot. How much prep did you have left, by the way?
we used 4, like 29. So 10, 5, 31.
Dang. Good man.
I can't.
Yeah. Which were in the Deci 10 system, right? 9, 6, yeah. Base 10, base 9.
Time.
All right.
We're ready.
Yeah, I'm good.
You've proven your point.
Consequences of actions outweigh the justification. That's the evidence says that if we win, the voting for us results in the vote are good, then you should vote for us because the unintended consequences are double IE. I think this is the best point. Is the key to voting people are hardly going to agree with in action of the dangerous city future says the one of the aggressive conflict off with the least war aggressive in 1962. Aggressive city is still in the missiles were drawn points of elections to risk and task of the way the miss until the deciding policy according to this point is key to determine if discourses and security practices are moral and ethical. Floyd 7 whether securitization possibly considered whether men and alternative better. First, the consequences of securitization more brightness to the securitization method that correspond to the consequential ethics of security are consequential to the value of security and security analysis critical evaluation speaking enables it encourage securitization of possible depending on the consequences. See supports key to policy making. Floyd 7 the securitization apparently makes it equal to determine independent states who ways to cause no harm in the person norm with arguing positive securitization doing the inclusive useful academic exercises how better policy can be about what is done with it and to protect this particularly good for policy recommendation. Now the delegation cannot not going to create back into theory debate that counterpredation only textually functionally competitive the delegation cannot solve their offense. One is specific plan ready plan text mean vague plan text means no more losses because of no solvency advocates takes argue the class choose the ground the best way to get unbreakable 2 ATMs do absent KF 3 half IC to choose the ground that they persuades the fact that 2 hours more time in the blocks 1 Harrison channel 4 is education delegation versus congressional implementation is a core question of policy. Certain agents are more able to solve certain policies than others, especially in space. Class 10 to be debates and programs regarding policies low necessary not switching agent table a new direction key not space policy has security our policy questions will able to correctly 5 best policy option if the plan is the best we shall find the best even the plan just part of the F6 rules 1 C solves emphasis congressional delegation to authority it gives authority to HEs all the time defense 1 predictable the affirmative choice of agent proves them there's a predictable set of agent debates and ground for both sides 2 let check counterplan has been run every year since the 90s and here's proof the distinction between the counterplan and the plan grounded in literature is also proves the counterplan permanently the counterplan and Severance Schoenberg 93 understanding versus consequences of flying different fundamental evidence general and makes law and well the delegates the laws will imposed by authority and delegate when powers they choose to do those laws different critical words from the statute delegates now is the implementation counterplan and Severance because they sever the congressional action one is the reckoning right reason rejecting it's also not no reasonable limitation by Congress is then enacted by a specific actor is the opposite of delegating responsibility which means they sever the process Epstein or Hale Evans proves this distinction they say it's a question of ethics crossed by answers cross questions above they say recommendation to both the links of politics to the presidential involvement of USFG all 3 branches which includes the president which means that because only the mandates USFG only the plan requires Obama to get involved plan pull cap and take blame for constituencies and congressional debate destroys solvency independent delegations more effective congressional policy meeting causes intervention and law goals and delays which would corrupt the solvency of the affirmative because the people who are controlling the least right now would intervene and would see the control of the people who are in right-wing conservatives. However, this is not true and would have just pure NASA policies. Now, the solvency of the counterplan delegates the authority to do the plan to NASA. And the second plan, the counterplan just fiats the NASA as a plan, which means it's obviously not conditional, which means they have zero quantifiable solvency. Across by our fast instead, these types of minor debates about the process of nuclear goods space because it's key to test the policies actually get enacted, which means that they can't claim any spillover or any reason why it's ethically good if it doesn't actually happen. We are in a better cross by the consequentials and big. Now, the causes of this was just not sufficient. Aaron proves the point that there is no piece of evidence that proves that reading the 1AC is key to any of their songs. This is an assertion. Don't let them get away with this by having grounded them instead of their evidence, their argument that we have contradictory positions is irrelevant as long as we win the condition out is good. And nothing that we said in the 1AC necessarily corrupts the solvency. Corrupts the solvency of the counterplan as long as we would that the net benefit of politics is negative. That means it should be sufficient. Outweigh the same links politics to no. And so when agency action avoids the blame, controversy about the plan is contained between Congress and NASA, which doesn't treat links to this side. we are political capital to like not focus or about partisanship. And here's more evidence for 94 and presentation because the delegation lunch is the biggest insult when even when policy directors don't lunch to action. Basic point is the voice spending to be Schoenberg 94 cross said that the vote responsible by the country to avoid when kind of loophole constitution appropriation and lawmaking by lawmaking spending and see that's why such an individual subject police center would lose ability to report to constituencies. Finally, when environmental links to the kind of plan of the plan, if you determine there will be a mighty versus carbon links less in the plan, then you vote negative offensive its paradigm is best because when given the option, no logical policymaker would endorse the plan. The alternative to this encourage judge intervention, which would negate the thesis of critical thinking and clash. Now, the politics page. Fiat doesn't solve the link, I'm going to have to get involved or take link for constituencies about the point, and this is bad interpretation for to be eliminated politics as between the crux and the ground education on political process and up-to-date research now. The next arguments of plan would material link huge to loss of political capital, current body plan improves administrative space and issues for your battles between the House and the Senate about the viability of space terms as a whole, using chronicle for evidence assumes they could be progressive on his James Webb Thunder argument doesn't really make sense because that was already something that was appropriated as part of the 2013 budget, and NASA went out and requested that. However, they have not made any reasons why the plan would be a part of the appropriations budget are new policies to happen in the middle of the year would be uniquely controversial because it seems disrupting causing critical trade-offs in the budget. Here's evidence proves that the plan would be massively expensive. New international street is in the legislative software complicated existing and lengthy delays fails to reply. Her performance demands started hard or simply amended more evidence here away in 91 becomes several expensive is still prototype 1 million 75,000 to 27,000 to fifth around. This does not include installation maintenance and more evidence fish 10 in 90 the rock things not extremely expensive permanent change and once this, so I'm going to preempt their argument that no, their evidence is not about cyber. We don't actually do a cyber ground. Yes, even if that may be true, just the perception of saying the word cyber in the context means that Congress will associate with the idea of massive expansion because Congress is irrational that proves that they will stream into this now. The impact of a warming causing extinction, they would not be able to adapt to extremely high temperatures, melting ice caps, that's ridiculous. This outweighs their impact is more certain, hence instead there is the fundamental climate change, the global stand up itself, and the crisis could be actually companies that were present then requires action, and you have a responsibility as a policymaker, Ellie, in climate change, the company that's the most focus reducing vulnerability in fact no, but you could grab possibly especially the facility human rights focus on climate delay or when questions now climate security isn't instrumental, it changes traditional security discourse, makes it moral, neither climate security discourse may be found opportunity to the climate security capitalize necessary to climate security discourse the more morally significant we should attempt to ecological security correctly significant no fixed assumption the mental and minded obligation and security would maybe pursue conformity and otherwise may help us cope with climate security and our impacts internally turns thereafter reconceptualizes environmental security this car smoke stairs those are any practices themselves appropriate in the work making sense more significant climate security only ways of protection more symptoms dumps constitution channels rather than the possible rules of legislative purpose our instances for environmental life and good schools sustainable public practice the other orientation and foundation for the keys identify security essentially the wants to be open to the climate issues advocate long-term security and human security climate change derived moral development and most security is failure to act for change the change set tools for global cooperation rather than to commonly set a framework as ecological security you already make principal policy doing those fellows more appreciating the security the question the assumption that our values change security and such political structure and influence our politics now they say it's not since one is polecat means the plan is an opportunity called Shellman 3 12 PCs found that the estimation of the PCs had to get deducted in the car president was politically paralyzed leaving agenda until 2 is the voting issue 8 is politics is agreed the cross with the B's Elimus Africa and not public files arbitrary seeking after asking which you shooting nigger skills clash now this even the cross by message for this would kill public arbitration is the judge policy who would assume the consequences of the plan which would do else political capital obviously the plan has been voted on which is still sure political capital say warming isn't real yes they have not read a piece of evidence on this question this concludes upon whether or not it's real are specific to environmental security and climate change even if the warming is not happening right now there's still conclusive evidence there's climate change happening now they say that we would spill over green tech our because it's not just green tech it puts caps on carbon emissions and provides a model seeing other countries to adopt the same export-import policy which would facilitate the solving climate change they say political not key however our James and Citizen's mom has pushed game momentum for crashing and PCK no compartmentalization political and 5315 accidentally current response in the real world they take much personalized XM targeted for bomb the vice back extendable more for all this in the back market policy the action drama one the issue the new action the commercial more William Sullivan she lost the question about the commercial and the acknowledging the later the channeling down into legislation the court is the market legislation
Okay. We're going to take out the counter.
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
No, sorry. Why are they coming?
yeah we're ready. That's 23 seconds.
Alright, sure. Let's talk about your political 315 evidence, since your last card you read. Stagnus capital key, no compartmentalization. What I'm reading of this is non-unique and it's compartmentalized. I'll read the line because it's short. You can try to defend it. X in debate in Congress has blossomed into a political brawl. The issues are bigger than the personalities.
Yeah, the issues are bigger than the personalities, meaning the issues are more
Mean
important.
that they care more about the issues
Yes.
than they do about like political considerations? This is
No,
an app card, right?
okay, the issues, i.e. the issues about XM, are bigger than personalities in Congress. Meaning that there's no compartmentalization, it's just about what certain senators are concerned about.
Let me read the rest of the sentence then. It's not like the issues are bigger than the personalities, affecting billions of dollars in US-backed loan guarantees for overseas sales of the Boeing aircraft.
Right.
So what that is saying is that they care more than the personalities about the reasons behind the bill, right?
They care about the issues of the bill. Obama's political capital empirically is able to overcome that. Our last piece of
Where
evidence
does this card say that? Where does this card say that?
Okay, which
Okay, where does it say that?
Just relax for a second. Williams evidence says that Clinton did this in the past, and it suggests Obama would be well to do the same thing. The Williams evidence.
Where did you read that?
That's the last card in the speech doc.
Did you get to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's marked at legislation.
Yeah. I mean, I could, like, yeah, it's fine. The top of the card talks about Obama.
Alright. It says Clinton, okay, I'll read this to you, because it's just so bad. Trade policy is easily the quickest thing Obama could accomplish. Clinton was a master of acknowledging labor rights, yet channeling them into legislation.
Yeah.
That's your vocab
We
key.
have multiple other pieces of evidence.
No, you don't. You have one card into it.
The Barless evidence we read, the James evidence from the 1C. Just because you're asserting that our evidence is bad is not an argument. I'm not really sure where this gets you.
Maybe the end of the debate, might right?
Alright, that's fine. Okay, you read this card that's like, pretty long card, and actually not terrible. That's like, confronting warming is key to breaking out anthropocentrism.
Dire
But I guess,
fantastic.
yeah, but in the context of the way that you justify warming throughout the debate, where it's like tickle, where it's like, we'll destroy humanity, and that's the reason we need to care about warming, right?
Well, I mean,
How do you access this?
well, okay, like the argument is that the way we justify warming doesn't matter. If warming causes extinction, that's bad. You should try to avoid it. However, dire evidence says that attempts to solve warming, not necessarily representations of it, but actual practices that lead to cooperation and urgency on climate change, lead to global cooperation, ecological
Alright,
security, have a moral significance.
Alright, okay. Explain to me the attempts to solve warming that the Exim bill will lead to.
Right, sure. Exim leads. You can see the warrant in our 1 and C evidence. It says Exim provides a global model, and empirically countries latch onto this model. However, it's about
to do what? A global model to do what? Do they stop driving cars?
To practice, to engage in green technology,
do green tax. Okay, so like when we use like factory farming to make ethanol, or like mining to create solar panels.
It's gonna be K. Well, where's condo flow?
Framework.
So, K, framework, politics. Okay.
Can you give me 1 minute?
And you guys have 508 left after the 23 seconds.
What, it's 1 in our round 6. Starts with 2 and C condo, right?
Yo.
Do you need this?
Can you need that? Just please.
That was bad. Whoa, that was good though.
Who wins in a fight between you and Patrick?
I would probably be Patrick.
Dang.
I mean, not because I'm like necessarily stronger or in better shape than him, but I have like a lot of reach on him. I have much longer arms than he does. So, I'd probably take him.
Irish fighting joke.
That's racist, man. Are you making a potato?
1 minute, 1 in our
Jeez.
Irish trip.
What's the order? Sorry.
It's gonna be K, framework, politics. Pick.
Okay.
Kenny, you got it? Yep. Everyone ready?
K will consider the permutation of this test competition that can get the hex into a C, otherwise filter to a situationality. Framework may be conditioned. We get 3 consistent positions in the 1 and C, and 2 in the block and 1 and 2 in R. This is best explore foster argument of innovation, incentivize risk taking, and the introduction of inventive positions, cutting edge research for second innovation of new intellectual terrain, and guards against failure on unimaginative repetition states the most educational curriculum. Second is it facilitates information processing, stimulating the information overload as best prepares the students to code most valuable skills ahead, and Eisenberg and Levin students are afraid of the information overload, the information literacy skills, are such critical thinking, lifelong on learning and succeeding life oriented. My democratic side information is infinite, but finding answers harder than ever. Precision information problem solving is the first entry. It promotes mixed scanning argument. Introduction is necessary for initial testing to determine which positions award and depth of review. That's the middle ground between breadth and depth. Q front recording setting high pressure decision making and zoning. 80, 60 initial scanning all the boxes and no clicking objections held over of closer scanning show observable features of exam. D this might change the reasons that might be changed by reasons center and 4 is that flex multiple object options has this film 2AC shift the focus of the debate critical necessary critical debates and 5 is correct check the atmosphere will take a minute to answer 6 times stress inevitable and the alternative is worse things will just be multiple T violations 7 the politics that expert imports keep the economy volatile and 4 5 the expert import factors and for our economy and price their influence no guarantees insurance and price of products American goods the overseas is 11 expert import factors 32 billion facts and worth 41 billion and expert says the expert American jobs support American jobs vitally US export sales profits with no cost taxpayers for the express and making the first time passage organization through the bank market bank insurance all your K impact store that's needed just as the prosperity is moving the Harvey class the rates the class rates at the worst not only the authoritarian value service the choice we're basing the ingredients of governing the conservative society is government doctors collapse the trigger of care from something close to fashion and violence propositions feeling so comparing for something is lower order values down now to the pick here's an overview of the words you use in your advocacy matters the use of the article does a definitive statement that creates a national boundary the perception of those who have the notion of national labeling of dream group and an advocacy interest their openness to the other arguments because there are difference between how they construct the United States in relation to the other that's our third episode the stand lift and results in a psychological investment in the new dream group factor distinctions which also totalitarianism and distinction now the permeation to cap over legit permeation of the entire 1AC context wording it's how we base make sure that they have the practical research with specifics of the word the severance is voting issue for 3 reasons and risk negative it makes negative possible to have a moving target second it's the argument of responsibility it happens on the discussion about how they said now it sees it kills education if learned has said undebated conclusions now the permeation to the capital doesn't seem to be lazy and get away with it when if the mishandle kills critical thinking and now they say permutation to whatever no net benefit there's no reason to do the permutation capital solves the entire of the case and only risk the plan would take capital solvency it'll be later second is the perms or the permutation steps of the word done the practice of what issue because the predicated off the words they use in the practice shift the advocacy and intimacy too late because it forces to read and stretch the block and the development debates always go after for because I'm asking that the language you utilize can reinforce status quo by attempting to simulate critical terms which is prior to their critical intent that sounds critical dissent this is the broadhead and two language which reinforces status quo by killing close and the political dynamic inherent in discourse the close language of the time discourse is so in modern societies you don't select them critical terms are relevant critical language because it's recalled because it reduces activity language he means of science critical dissent of to reduce the tension between existing reality and the practical challenges to mark on it now they see where big back number one is education the biggest structural narrative and debate to linguistic precision was coded because it teaches how to analyze the rhetoric we employ which can identify how we orient ourselves second is the real world that ways in the context of the questioning the language we describe culture should be prioritized in questioning framing some of the lasting word and just specific policy analysis and third is counterfactual only word takes with strong literature basis of course they enforce the have to defend the way they write their plan and solving progressive claims and four is considered context writing make context meaning the losses and no some advocates ensure workplace ensure class clash 5 is negative ground best which test to guard against unpredictable choice the add-ons and 6 is that bias I'll explain on the conduct flow 7 is best policy structure that makes picture level all the picture compounds which key offset after the ability which are ways to be the compound and then that's not voter voting theory worse direct their economic team and representation class material balance which actually scratch that I'll get back to this maybe later though they say we still link to have our offensive
Language is good.
Where I say that
Maybe just go on.
They say we still link to have our offensive and paradigms being it's a question of a link differential. If we win the lane warm, you vote negative. Now they say Butler, however, 0. They do not censorship. They just think the words that are offensive should not be used in public policy documents. Their arguments just that saying we should not allow policymakers to call people the and word in the press conference. And second, Butler votes that concedes that really should speak to appropriate way. There's a few story about how it's negative effects as a flesh. And does not think some people should be prosecuted for induced speech, regulated speech. Only when they have a story to tell about harmful effects, she's not supposed to speech. Regulation 5 is negative. That I think consists of risk performance. Ignores the very real political and motive damage up to the trust in certain words if women have benefit, you should know it's starting in that spot. And other words is the dream of escaping from other principal researchers, which is dream of other research in this fine space for resistance, realize dangerous processes, the institutional structure will never be tested by the best of thought, unless there is always imagine legal or institutions to be safe to slavery will never change. But you can find a way of mocking it, choose calling legal to change it. It's impossible. We should away to preserve the space within now. Back to the argument, this language is fluid, however, even if it is fluid for specific arguments, that creates real material violence. That was from the overview.
Alright, I'll start now.
What are the voting issues? Can you do the team, sorry?
Severance,
Politics theories, and
politics, theories, or reasons to reject the argument. None of them are voting issues, just reasons to reject the arguments.
Okay. Okay, all those are, there's no voting issues in the book? No. Okay. Great, let's make sure.
Were you watching the debate? Were you watching the debate, Travis?
Who's that say, Ray?
GDS.
They're undefeated.
Yeah, there wasn't. They're reading the new GeoSat, which is the satellite observation of the defenses of science and exploring.
Who's? Okay.
Like democratic peace theory kind of stuff.
One second, Brandon.
Here.
Okay. Yeah.
2060s. We'll just go around 26 options anyway.
Good.
Just reset it.
739 minus 26 is
13, 713.
Base 10.
what?
Base 10.
Wouldn't it be great if it was all base 10? That's the problem with contemporary society. I actually feel proud.
Two lead flows here, Nathan.
Yeah. I did.
Corpus,
Yeah.
corpus.
How much purpose is? I'm pretty sure purpose is a turtle.
Seal, seal line,
Porpoises are
walrus.
wait. Fair.
Well, then you
What's
saw
that?
me and I felt guilty. Okay, that's true. I see what you did there.
Yeah.
You moved around on me.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it, I just had to
That's what I do.
keep moving my tapes, or my, clear it off, so I shoot it again.
So how much you guys have left? 715?
Order is going to be case, framework, the critique, the word pick, the NASA counterplan, or yeah, delegation counterplan, sorry. Delegate to NASA, sorry. And then politics. Actually, yes. No, that's what I'm doing. Okay.
Case, framework, pick, and sorry, read again?
Case, framework, the criticism, word pick, delegation counterplan, politics.
Delegation cover.
Okay.
Actually, put politics before delegation counterplan.
Okay.
All right, ready?
But I'm not.
I'm not. Not close. Actually.
I don't know.
You bet.
All right. To continue next one I say first, so joint allows control to users and saying let's say the normalization of population for wars, the conceded extinction and back out of the value, which means you should vote negative on the special second consider ethics and maybe have ethical obligation. This comes before all other questions of their compensation because we owe ourselves to the other before anything else. Now they are right that consequences matter, but the question is what is the consequence? They have conceded that death is not independent. They concede that death is not independent. All matter is trivially equal. That is our joint evidence, which is the living body and the corpse are of the same ontological significance. They concede that extinction is certainly not alive for our caloric evidence because the universe is expanding. All matter will never be destroyed. Between the only thing matters is the intentionality to which we relate with other beings and proves these point the obligation to the others. No new to our analysis and belief. Like one of your strategy of black such now the conditionality not going for their counter interpretation allows for judge take which is necessary. That makes them offensive. You should not be able to. You should not be able to take their arguments for them in the tuner. Otherwise, otherwise it's necessarily bad because we can never be able to predict what the tuner is going. What the tuner is going to be. We say if they go for next, you should stick them and assume that stick them with that in the lock. Now the criticism practice they've conceded a link to this critique. No new black strategy. They conceded that the NASA is filled with anxiety through the desire to create a perfect society. When I see is our officer pointed that this means we have an internal link to the destruction of the ego of the national identity on the word recovery, not permeation. The kind of permeation who both solves the majority of offense. It is not severance. The incorporation is the juxtaposition laws of the criticism of the word and the national security state at the same time. Their evidence is not good enough. There's only chance that they link to it just as much because even if they don't say the, they still say you. Nationalist fellow government, which means they're still saying the ideas of national boundaries, which means we get our offense how language is through. That's our data set. Language is entirely fluid, just like power. The assumptions that words have power outside of the context we give them makes real resistance. You hegemonic not only impossible, but it is also disproven by the fact that the word bitch has been redeployed by the feminist movement to be a form of empowerment, which proves the thesis about the common is necessarily bad. They only reinscribe the idea of national identity and the power of the national security state by assuming that it's impossible to resist with the word stream. They fall into the exact same trap. They talk about the other self-deficits in the common plan will also be self-deficits here now. They say economic collapse now is just like the warring theory and goes driving gas prices to human extinction. The climate rather than later policies are incompatible. Human futures cut about student opportunities return. You nation full of discounts now the earth is much so I take away the better strength, humanity take the better medicine, never the cover, or the climate be the fall soon and the development is key. You switch a smaller sustainable size, the otherwise the impact is nuclear war through extinction, leads to mindset shift at Jordan and then it versus sediments and the other most serious problem about the extended. You and resources from agricultural policy to describe the second food waste rising the survival. We do not use the full of nuclear war complex materialism chance for nuclear compromise from combination resource no solution to get a sustainable society growth and people must realize that the potential consequence of the solution can catastrophe change the whole society would take too many measures to sugar stable side. There's no impact. You academic decline causing war. You should not let them do that in the 2 hour because obviously does not period go let's go away to multiple academic declines and not cause right now. They're no impact to their economic arguments. We reject fascism just as well as they do not going for the politics theory arguments, but there's no D rule on warning you because we have a stronger controlling for the destruction of the environment. Nuclear war would obviously also just will destroy the environment. To quote their dry evidence is quote long-term human security. Human security. This is exactly the link to the logic of control or the criticism of our drone evidence as well as our Buell evidence. Their framing of the environment strictly in human terms makes environmental collapse inevitable because we assume that the environment exists as a resource outside of itself simply for us to manipulate and destroy, which means the one I see is necessarily a precursor to any of their moon scale being able to stop. They've also conceded in all causalities to warming the app necessarily will stop is deforestation. That is our net 2 evidence that says that arguments are comparative that it's actually destroying the environment. We're seeing there green tech is not able to stop companies would still necessary to destroy forests go to the other kind of thing.
Also, you can't link to an ethics.
Yeah, also you can't link to an ethics. All the arguments made about ethics being firm in the media stand the case to be proved this. And now the other content not going for actually they messed up permutation of the content. It's only severance of the standard of competition of the planet. They've conceded that the standard of competition is the ethical justification. The one I see that was not the case today when they conceded the role of the better is most ethical strategy, which means that at minimum you achieve with the content is able to study for the first is delayed. Do not take our sovereignty because the app can be solved in the media. I think the political speech act is key to sovereignty. Now they result their decision to read the conflict conditional. They have been good in the theory of conditionality, but the decision made that their obligation to the other was only so far as it was to teach them. A quote from our Notre says that ethics must be unconditional to the other, which is a direct thesis of why their decision to run the conflict in the way that they did mean they can't access the ethical sovereignty. The one I see also they concede, also they essentially conceded, or can't they said that they engaged in a process of footnoting. The conflict essentially says, they engaged in a process of footnoting. The conflict essentially says that we will to take the revolution potential. The one I see in redeployed for other means idea, the the idea of the net benefit is the exact same thing, which means that should be more critical. They also clear fact that in their speech check, they both criticized the 1AC and also said it was a good idea, proves that they are just a form of political regurgitation of the 1AC, not able to. And also, the counterpart will link to the net benefit. Their cards are about reappropriation, but they're not good. They're not very good on the question of actually giving NASA full reign of the agency, which was obviously linked to politics, and then offense defense is necessarily bad because otherwise you can just go to a dissent that already passed like politics and say, no, 100% risk of defense.
Can I see the Yule evidence and...
Hey, real quick, you have 5 of it.
Yeah. Can I see the Yule evidence and
Geronin.
Geronin. Hold on. The language for the chart.
Okay.
Are you sure you don't have it?
I mean, all four.
I'll just be all you grab.
I'll grab it for you. Okay. And here's page 1 of the 8
Can I see the unconditionality card?
Yeah, that's the long ass intro card. I could just get you the one. Let me just pull up the part that says unconditionality for you.
Oh. Here's the first page. Just like the second color, so it's on the second page. You're wrong.
It's literally on page 20.
Yellow
which
and
not here right now.
orange.
No, yeah.
Just orange. That's the Campbell, that's the footnote.
You see page 23 of the training.
You know, I might have that.
It's at the very bottom of page 23 of the card.
Hopefully we'll find it at some point.
Is there something? Sorry, let's switch over to check.
Nathan, there's more papers on that chair. I don't know if that's related. Right there.
This?
Yeah,
That's not it.
on the chair itself, no?
No, it starts here and then it goes.
Oh, okay.
I had the footnote card.
No, it's the gate card.
Is he the footnote?
No, I would like to see.
Okay. I don't know where page 23 is in the chart. It might probably over there.
No, this is 20, so he's definitely one.
I know, when I see it.
Is it the Campbell card?
The Campbell card's the footnote. Here's the second page. It's again, it's up
Yeah,
here.
right
Everything's
here.
up
Our
here.
human tendency to treat the enemies defended unconditionally.
All right, that's fine.
Sorry. What'd you got? I'm here.
Before I saw, so, broke my heart.
What's up, dude, Reno?
It's like I had a sentence while I was around.
The order
Okay.
is gonna be the A on top,
Sure.
politics page,
Politics page.
delegation and pitch.
Delegation and the work deck.
And are you bad?
Yeah.
Okay, delegation and work deck.
Let's like put it over here.
K, politics. Case, delegation, work deck.
No, we're not hitting on the page.
Oh no, case politics, delegation, work deck. Yeah. Okay.
But case politics kind of playing with it.
Yeah. K, politics, counterplan, work deck.
You're killing me, dude.
I'm sorry.
No, not you, this dude.
I'm the worst.
You went for thirds on the order, man.
That's pretty good for me, too.
There you go.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
All right, good to go.
Yeah, I'm ready. I don't know about these
You guys ready?
Yeah, we're good.
Alright.
On the line.
The controlling terms of the case doesn't matter because we are subsuming all the reasons why NASA aggressively we're solving anxiety, which is controlling terms of the case because we are doing it through the perfect. Now, the politics, so we're not going to concede, it doesn't, the new GDF argument doesn't matter because we are conceding that we result in the plan, and if that kills political capital and that would collapse the economy, that would be sufficient to solve their GDF arguments. Now, the delegation camp plan, we're not going to concede permission to the camp plan. Their role of ballot must be most ethical. We subsume that we function within the role of ballot. We are necessarily better. I'll explain that. I'll explain that a little bit more. Their delay solvency test doesn't make any sense because we're not delaying the comment. Their unconditionality solvency test also doesn't make any sense because their evidence is talking about the gesture must be unconditional. However, it's not the context of like theoretical arguments like yes, the camera is conditional, we can kick different worlds. It's talking about when something is presented, it must be unconditional. I.e., the camera plan, we're only going for one camera in the two which means that because you're not going to give force, it becomes an unconditional gesture and it becomes an ethical obligation that we think that this is something that should be done. We think it's a good idea, but we think that you should not use the word because that perpetuates their second argument about the footnote. You say their only line in that card just says that performative statements are important. There is no reason why, which means they cannot access this as a quantifiable solvency test to the camera line. And even if you do think the evidence is rhetorically powerful, when the conceded extinction of benefit of otherization probably would be sufficient to outweigh. Now the page at the top, the meta level framing issue, they've conceded the use of the word the link terms their otherness and ethical obligation claims. I don't understand why we can't link term their ethical obligation a little later. The words that you use in your advocacy matter, use of the article the and the definitive statement of the creation of the national boundary. This the perception of the solidifies the notion of national identity by labeling group inside NASA association. This link terms their openness to the other arguments because there's a difference between how they construct the United States in relation to the other. That's what the third or sign of the evidence said. This perpetuates totalitarianism and authoritarianism. When we use policies and we say that we say the word the, we think that we are above other sorts of nations, which perpetuates the binary of the U.S. being a monolithic entity, which means that in a world where they have not made a single solid sense about how specifically the counter plan doing their plan text would be unable to resolve the ethical gesture. There is no reason that in the world of the counter plan there's no reason that there's no benefit to voting affirmative, especially when they lead to totalitarianism, which our list of evidence causes extinction through the and only turns to ethical gesture arguments because when we view people as less than us, i.e. other nations, we treat them as less than us, which it destroys the ethical gesture. We treat them as less than human, which is the thesis of their 1AC about why we need to accept cyborgs. We solve all the reasons why cyborg was good. The line. They see permutation, but they made a juxtaposition argument. This juxtaposition, the juxtaposition and permutation is, yes, the card is talking about a juxtaposition. However, in the 2AC, it was just permutation, which means that it's intrinsic, which the voting should be when on unlimited affirmative ground. The argument was made on the public flow. Either way, they can see the masculine side of broadhead evidence against the language we use utilizes reinforces the status by trying to repress it. Arvin says that the language we speak tries to assimilate potentially critical and packaging it into a debate that seems by packaging it into something that seems benign and it seems like something that's good. But however, our indicates that when you do that, it resurfaces and it causes something a worse form of other issues of politics, which links to all the reasons why the net benefit would outweigh. They say the language is fluid and this is impossible. They concede that you should prefer the specificity of our net benefit. You should prefer the specificity of our net benefit evidence. They said that words will get redeployed and that you should reject them. They have not made a single censorship argument. All of their arguments about Butler's why censorship is good answer this argument. The Flish evidence says that if you agree that our net, the word use of word is the, which means because it is conceded, it means the use of word the perpetuates authorization. And that means even if you think that in the general context that language may be fluid, that in this specific context we have proven that the worst of the is bad, thus you should reject it. There's no reason to try to juxtapose that. You shouldn't do that work for them. And the second piece of the Nussbaum evidence says that in the instance of this, or in this instance, Butler would agree with us because this language is bad and it's offensive, and it would cause other illusion. Anything else, Aaron? Sorry.
What should we have?
I think 7:30. Yeah, 7:13.
36, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it'll really get you.
Oh, what's that?
The order, hold on, my pen. I'd like to flute. Hi. I'd like to flute. I was gonna say.
I wish I
Yeah,
could.
you would.
Alas, yeah.
Why are you creeping over here, bro? Come on. Alright. Alright.
Lisa.
Case. K. Yeah. Politics. The aging current plan and the word pick. Do that again. Yeah, case,
Tension.
K, politics, aging current plan, word pick. That's what I messed up.
It's a misleading order.
Wait, hold on, sorry. I'm just moving my cells over now. So.
Yeah.
Okay, there you are. Yeah. Good? Yeah, for sure.
They are still conceding our ethics impact on case. We constantly oversell self-ethics. We are constantly by ethics. One thing, the case of ethics is an opening, two ethics not. There's a little bit of, there's another piece, there's a little bit of defense or conceding that death doesn't matter, which means there's no external impact, no external impact to the counterpart. Extinction is settled because the expansion of the universe is the card elements, but all matter is equal. There's no difference between the living body and the corpse. That's the internal elements, which means there's absolutely no risk of an external element, just a case when they have conceded. Intentionality is all that matters because all materiality is terminally doomed as per the card elements, which means it's just the questions of ethics because that's the only thing that can be uniquely affirmed. And when this is impacted on politics, there's a reason why they are not able to ask any case arguments because our ethics are individual. We can decide affirm them in the moment, just decide to be ethical. That is all we need to do the case. It doesn't matter what other people fundamentally decide. Do not have the you can't drop a link to non-can. We break down the violent fantasy of the NASA narrative, which means we solve that we inherently solve the logic of nationalism. Means we have 100% access to the net benefit of the counterplan, which means first you shouldn't be scared to vote on presumption. They can see the analysis on politics of this or on the aging counterplan that this is a silly way for evaluating a silly way for evaluating that wasn't the counterplan for evaluating net benefits because it leads to the politics systems like things that already passed, which means that you should be able to vote on presumption. But this also means a 1% risk of a solvency deficit is enough to take out the counterplan because you're not allowed to take it. They've conceded that from the framework of politics. Another reason we have a total inroad is that they've conceded the plan breaks down the economy. They've conceded a Jordan evidence, which means that we switch to small growth societies. Means there is no nation state to have violent national identity. Now the counterplan is going for these two solvency deficits because he didn't do a very good job of answering them first. The conditional argument analysis in the 2NR is due. Should reject because he's just sandbagging the 2AR, which, believe it or not, is a relatively hard speech. This analysis is done by their initial gesture to make the counterplan conditional, specifically links to our argument. They drop the 1 year's analysis of the fact that they negated and affirmed our speech act in the same speech proves that it doesn't matter. The card our intro evidence is actually good on this question that an ethic to actually be an ethic at all needs to be unconditional, or else it's not really an ethic at all. Means 100% risk of a solvency deficit. Now others the performativity argument always says that our evidence is bad. This analysis is also new. He said himself that bad evidence is not an argument. This card is actually good. It explains how politicians and academics use a footnoting process in other policies. They drive it as secondary. They do not care about it because it's just a means to reach their other politics. The actual goal of the counterplan is to take out the word the. Their goal means their ethics will always be secondary, 100% risk of a solvency take out. Now, first of all, they've conceded that this counterplan links to the net benefit. There's nothing inherent about the word the that reinscribes national identity, saying the United States federal government is probably just as nationalist as the same nationalist selection supply. There's no unique reason. I'd also like to point out that they're going for the pick. Think about that when you're making your decision. But the drop language is fluid. Prefer the specificity analysis is incoherent because this is an overarching argument about the way language operates. It doesn't make sense that specifically in the context of the language would not be fluid. Our gay evidence is better better on this question. On other baller answers are able to answer this. Baller cards are saying that individuals can make a choice to not use words that they consider offensive. But this is a broader argument. We say that the shape your mouth makes and the sound that leaves your mouth when you say the word the is not. There's nothing inherently violent or nationalist about it. It's a question of the frames through which you deploy play, what you are thinking about, that is what matters. It's not the word, it's not the word itself, which means that the case's unique critique of violence as per Jordan Evans' unique critique of status violence as per Alania's evidence are able to solve the impact. There's also a terminal risk of a no net benefit to this conduct, because there's nothing unique about the word that causes nationalism, but it's also obvious because they are conceding Nathan's analysis that. Yeah, they're conceding Nathan's analysis that they inscribe the word to always already be bad instead of allowing for positive alternatives. Nathan is citing empirical examples the way the gay movements have reappropriated the word queer in order to be their own, the way the feminist movements have reappropriated the word bitch, which means that we have allowed for a better risk of turning their net benefit, because there is only a risk that we can use the word that to mean something non-violent.
The term, we both.
Oh.
Not juxtaposition.
Extend permutation to both. It's not juxtaposition. It's able to combine the logic of the counter.
It's juxtaposition. We both. It's juxtaposition.
It is juxtaposition. It uses the words any risk of defense on the word the is the reason the perm does not link to their offense, because we're able to engage in their critique of nationalism. We use the word the sometimes, but we don't use it in the same meanings that it's been used in the past. Permutation solves.
Putting the two plan texts next to each other.
Putting the two plan texts next to each other
allows like the incorporation of the criticism of the word
allows for the incorporation of the criticism of the word the with our otherwise good logic.
Yeah.
Like, there is zero risk of a net benefit because of the conceded link terms and the conceded defense, which means you can probably run a presumption, because you should go after going for counter plan, net more change. Otherwise, they just go for counter plan, do the plan.
Yeah.
Only a risk of an insolvency deficit.
Alright, let me see this languages fluid card.
You got it.
Yeah, I assume that there's none of your cards that I'm missing.
Do you want to see the one in C?
I got that.
Oh, yeah, that's, I didn't know.
That's what I thought.
You had the case on there.
I didn't know either.
That's it.
There's also the second page.
The second page.
Yeah. Somewhere around here.
Yeah.
Does anybody not here that isn't here? Okay. I thought this was a pretty good debate. I voted F. I think that you had some chances, and I think like winning 2-0 was possible in this debate, but there's like a lot of tricky stuff that in the aggregate makes it pretty hard for you to win. And also at sort of like, even that alone might not be enough for me to vote for them, but also you're not so good on the language debate that I'm not convinced that their theory could be wrong. And given all the ticky-tack stuff, the threshold for that is to be pretty high for me. So here's what I end up thinking. The 2AR characterizes the case debate as there is no external impact to the net benefit to the counterclaim, which I think is true. I don't hear that you'd be making an external net benefit. So I understand your argument to be primarily it turns the case. The AF does not realize its own evidence because it uses the term the, which reinscribes national identity, turns the AF. That being said, that means that the neg has to win a pretty substantial risk of the link because the only offense you have is the link differential. So there's not some like external magnitude that you can weigh versus their link. It's just percentage of link versus percentage of link, either way. So that's a pretty difficult threshold for you in terms of offense. Like if you had a card that was like, this form of geopolitics is like the most significant impact, like geopolitics itself, for some reason, has asserted its supremacy as a particularly violent form of otherization. Maybe like a Burke card that was like security practices of the state are the most dangerous form of machinations or something. That might help, even if it's just a root cause argument. But that being said, your impact cards largely seem to be things that the affirmative is talking about. So things like totalization, totalizing thought doesn't see that distinct from the Geronin cards about creating a world picture. I mean, they both seem like forms of totalization. Their card is pretty clear that that leads to like formal institutional totalitarianism, which is what your Lifton evidence is about. Their cards are clearly talking about geopolitical us-them dichotomies as well. So I think that given that context, the other frustrating thing sort of for you all trying to get a decision is that presumption flips affirmative, and I don't think you have much of an argument about that. I can't get the counterpoint for you because they've also established a pretty robust like no judge conditionality argument. So even if that was my default, like in this case, an absence of argument from you, that's clearly the framework that's established. So there seems to be a couple of reasons that national identity appears to be inevitable or solved by the AF alone. that decrease the risk of a link differential. The first is this breakdown of the NASA fantasy of control argument. I think you need to explain more clearly how NASA could establish new fantasies of control in a world of the use of the, but given that it seems like their sort of destabilization of NASA's distinction between humans and robots is like a pretty significant way of destabilizing the nation state as like an entity in the case of the AF, in the case of space policy. So it's hard for me to envision what like even a possible world of violence would be like. But maybe there is one. B is this DDEV argument. So beyond sort of the theoretical or like ethical level, there's also the material fact that in a world of either the AF or the counterplan, the USFG probably ceases to exist as we think of it now because the economy collapses. So it seems hard for me to envision what sort of military instruments the government would use to engage in practice of otherization. Maybe they're possible. I suppose both teams have said those practices of otherization cause violence, but it seems unlikely that those acts of violence would be very large in a world where the material economy collapses. The third thing is that the use of the USFG seems to make some of that violence inevitable. Now, I agree that your 1 and link evidence is good enough that this does not establish anywhere near a 100% takeout, but it does seem a little difficult to me. Your evidence is not so good that it says that only the worst use of the word the is the problem. It says that in addition to the, sort of all of the languages of geopolitics are problematic. It specifically talks about the, so I'm persuaded that that probably has some offensive value to you, but not enough to establish a super clear link differential. So then I look at the rest of the debate. At this point, I think that your chances of garnering offense seem fairly low, but still possible, because none of these things I think are 100% takeouts to your offense. The permutation I don't think is intrinsic. I think that you have to make a more robust link explanation of the intrinsicness. In this case, you're like, it has juxtaposition, which is intrinsic, and they're like, no, it just literally is the two plans together, and I don't know, that's clearly not intrinsic. It doesn't add anything that's not in either of them. It's literally just the two. And I think that their explanation of this is fairly persuasive. I don't think that the evidence set either way is so good that either team is overwhelmingly winning, and your evidence might even be a little better, but their explanation is by far and away better about the possibility of reclaiming some of these terms. And you need to explain examples of where terms have been unsuccessfully reclaimed, where those movements go awry, or an explanation of how like some sort of takeover is more likely or possible in a world of this language. And I think this is sort of one of the drawbacks to this argument, is that although the evidence for this pick is fairly good, it's difficult for me to understand a persuasive reason, like sort of scenario or like world of tropes that arise that are uniquely more violent than those that would exist in the world of just using the term USFG or any of the other things I've talked about. So I think that the permutation probably solves some of the link. And then there's only the risk, it seems like the risk of offense is this like you staticize language argument, which I think is less sort of a disad to the counterplan and more an impact turn to your residual offense against the permutation. So it's like in order for you to win offense, you have to win that you always have to say the term the is bad. And that treats language as static and seems to make institutional resistance pretty difficult. Your best cards on this are this Nussbaum card, which is criticizing Butler for making institutional resistance too difficult because she treats discourse as too totalizing, which I think, I'm not even certain is like a convincing negative piece of evidence. That's not an argument in the debate, but it's not really extended by the 2NR either. So ultimately, I guess I don't think that evidence saves you from the debate. I'm not sure it helps them, but you know what I mean? So yeah, I guess ultimately I voted F on the perm and a risk of offense to the residual link, and a pretty low risk of any offense on your side, which I think, given the framing, is a winning decision for them.
What do you think about like the solvency deficits?
I didn't find those particularly persuasive, to be honest. Like, I don't really understand why this particular counterplan footnotes the F. You all could be better on this, though, although, even given what you said, I wasn't persuaded by it. But I would just be like, it might help your story a little bit to just be like, look, the app takes the ethical strategy of the 1AC seriously. This isn't footnoting, it examines the points of crystallization that the app offers for its ethics and tests sort of whether they fit into its analytic of the world or whether they sort of inscribe a secret, like, set of violences within them, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, that's what your card says. It's like, dude, it seems like the big nation is like really the threat, but in reality, it's like the small, everyday things that are more concerning. And I think fitting it into their footnoting stuff a little better. Also, you could say that that to some degree the permutation is a footnoting of the term the, which is not something that you say, but I think this argument is potentially better for you than it is for them. And that's something I would be careful of. Like, and I get it's kind of tricky for you because I do think these arguments are somewhat persuasive in the context of the delegation counterclaim. But in this case, the net benefit is just an internal link term to your app, so like I don't really get how it's footnoting.
What do you think is a better way to generate like offense?
I think the static language argument is a very persuasive argument.
Okay.
And I think you should spend like invest more evidence time in that in the 2AC.
Okay.
So you need like another card on that.
Do you think like the conditional ethics argument was that persuasive or?
I mean, not, like I said, not in this case, really.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe,
Well-
sort of, but like,
Is there a way to like frame that? Because like,
I don't know. I thought his spin about how like this is the argument we're going for in the 2NR, and we've spotted you no judge conditionality is like fairly persuasive because it's like you have allowed your ethics to have a substantive impact on the nature of how the performance of the debate evolves. So like, what more do you really want from that? They should lose because at some point in the debate it was possible for them to kick the argument. That seems, I don't know, man. That seems like a little tenuous.
okay, fair.
I'm not angry, but I'm just like probing for other solvency arguments we could be making.
But no, I think the argument you should make is just the one that you did make.
Okay.
Like, I don't think, I guess to me, like, I don't think there is like a more persuasive argument necessarily. I just think that's a really good argument to be like, the AF is not solved because you staticize language, and the whole AF is about how we're beings in language, and that language emerges towards us rather than being like a tool that we use. You know, like that's what that Gironian evidence is about. That's Heidegger's theory of language. It's not a piece of equipment. The medium is not the message. The message is in our interpretation of the medium. You dig? That's why it's like, if you really wanted to get into this, you could be like, there's a bunch of Heidegger cards that are like, the language is a response to a question, a primordial question of being, which means that the interpreter and not the speaker is the agent in sort of his conception of the human. Does that make sense?
Could that be like almost like a term for them, like because they found fault within the word the, it's like the reason why their speech act is like.
I just think it's a criticism of the focus on speech rather than interpretation.
Okay.
It's like you know?
Yeah.
That's the whole reason why like you shouldn't elevate speech over writing is because the assumption is that speakers have some sort of pathos, but the problem with that is that it assumes that speech rather than listening or interpretation is more important, and that there's some sort of presence that the speaker garners. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's exactly what you're saying about humans and machines. For you all, I think the biggest problem with your strategy or in the debate is that you just gotta read more of these consequences cards, like a lot more. And given how unwilling you were to pursue framework, I don't know if I would read it. Like, what did it end up getting you? You didn't extend it. You didn't go to it and use any of the arguments to sort of get you something else. So I would just read a bunch of cards that are like, you can't abstract away from the institutional context of how reality works. Like, postpositivism is just like, dude, yeah, sure, stuff's constructed, but that doesn't mean that the constructions don't operate in a predictable way, and that people don't have to make assumptions based upon how those constructions play themselves out. That's like Guzini realism, you know what I mean? And that kind of stuff would make these arguments more persuasive, because you're like, okay, sure, like, in a perfect world, no one would manage the environment, but is that like really feasible? And is it ethical to ignore the role that discourse is already in motion play in creating political possibilities? You know what I mean? So you should be like, import, export, best possibility available to us. You know? I think that's like a better strategy for you all. And maybe some more like, just some more consequences arguments.
Do you think a better 2NR would have just been like, let's go like politics and case?
Maybe. Well, like I said, the problem in the debate is that you don't have the evidence set for that because you didn't read a bunch of, like, you didn't read the ethics cards you need to read for that to be persuasive. I'm certainly not, like, against that strategy, but just, like, you have to set it up. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't know.
What did you think about the 1 and CK? The critique, the second analysis critique?
I don't know, dude. I think you could be onto something, but their argument's not a Haraway argument. This is a great case of Haraway, but that's not what their app is. Their app's a Deleuze app. And that's what they're like, they're not saying that, but that's what they're saying when they're like, so I could have been persuaded by it had you extended it well. Like, I'm not gonna like read into the debate and be like, this is not what they're saying. Their argument's about Deleuze. But at the same time, given the way they've couched their arguments, I'm fairly persuaded that they're not an intent to utopianism, because their whole argument's about how the cyborg is like an identity that's perpetually broken. And that the important part about situating it as the agents of space policy is that it doesn't resolve itself, not that it does. And that's the problem with the nostalgia for the human, is that it's nostalgia for the resolution of all of the assemblages that we see as organic or inorganic into one form. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's why I think a better strategy would just be like, dude, breaking things apart is bad. We need to have unity, maybe like a Marxism gag. And I'd be like, okay, yeah, sure. We need to create a unified body politique, and that's like good. And your arguments are like kind of not making that happen. You know what I mean? Something like that would be more persuasive. I just think you have to go the opposite way instead of the way that you do.
And then just like last question, we were considering a counter critique for the.
I'd be open to it, yeah, actually. I think that would have been a pretty good strategy against the staff. I'm not necessarily persuaded that the function of the plan is terribly important to the staff. So, yeah, I definitely listen to that. Okay, for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, good radio.
Thank you.
Patrick, trumpets you could fight. What? Trumpets you could fight.
So food, are you guys eating?
Dying.
Sure.
Yeah, you look like you're dying.
Yeah.
Dying, yeah.
Dying.
Hey, good